Sick of getting blisters? Stop slipping and just be comfortable with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Great fit, great comfort, lots of grip, and an even better price. Available now at puregripsocks.com.
While across the board, Nike Takedown models tend to be pretty good for what you pay, when it comes specifically to their Academy tier level, their mid-cut models are what I've really taken issue with, in that consumers are paying more for a product that is essentially worse. Where maybe you have a difference of opinion, but the mid-cut collar on this Superfly 9 Academy just looks horrendous. I just don't think anybody should be paying an extra $10 for this over the much cleaner and arguably better fitting Vapor variation. Enter the brand new Nike Zoom Mercurial Superfly 10 Academy, also a mid-cut football boot, but as you can see, it features a collar that borderline looks like the Flyknit material you'd find on the top-end $285 version. Aesthetically, it's the best looking Academy tier Superfly ever made, and when you account for all the other changes Nike have made to this generation of Academy tier Mercurial, it's arguably the best sub $100 Superfly Nike have ever put out. Where granted, they still retail for $95 just like the previous generation, which is still a $10 premium over the alternative, which would be the low-cut Vapor 16 Academy, a football boot that is every bit as good when you're talking about what you actually get for your money. But for the first time ever, if you really like the idea of a mid-cut football boot, this is arguably the most premium design we've ever had at the sub $100 price point. Which is awesome to see, because that's really what this price point is all about, value for money, which is why in today's video we're going to be going over all the tech specs of the Superfly 10 Academy, the good, the bad, how they fit and feel on feet, and ultimately whether or not they are truly worth $95 over slightly less expensive alternatives from both Nike as well as other brands. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around, and if you are interested in a pair for yourself, you can pick them up below their normal retail prices by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes via the first link down below. And as always, if you enjoy the unsugar-coated, brutally honest reviews on this channel, don't forget to drop a like on this video and make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you haven't already, so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2024. So first things first, compared to last year's Superfly 9 Academy, the Superfly 10, I would argue, is an improvement in just about every single way, other than maybe the stud pattern, which is different but hasn't realistically changed all that much. On paper, the tech specs read very similarly, but in reality, this new Superfly 10 Academy is just much more premium across the board in terms of the feel of materials in hand and especially on feet. It's not that these were bad, but this is a gigantic improvement. Starting with the upper, which is still a mesh-based Nike skin material, you can see the chevron pattern kind of revealed through that top layer of translucent kind of polyurethane Nike skin, if you will, and you can see the construction of the upper actually mimics what you'll find on the high-end variation, where there is a little bit of a change up into more of a standard mesh through the midfoot, and then you also have a different material across the top of the foot. Unfortunately, it's not grip knit, atom knit, and fly knit like the top end Elite model. It's pretty much just mesh all the way through, but because of that, it's very soft, it's very pliable, it's not necessarily lacking in structure, and certainly compared to last year's Superfly 9 Academy, it fits significantly better and feels way more comfortable. And because the material as a whole just moves more naturally with your foot to touch on the ball, for how thin this upper is, feels very raw. It gives you that premium barefoot experience, and despite being almost a third of the price of that top-end Superfly 10 Elite, you're still getting that thin barefoot speed boot experience that you would expect to find from a pair of Mercurials, which so often when it comes to these sub $100 price point variations, while they might look like the top-end model, they don't feel like it. That is not the case here with the Superfly 10 Academy though. Although in saying that, unlike the top-end Elite model, there is no extra grip on the surface because this isn't grip knit. So in terms of friction on the ball, It's pretty much the same as all past Nike Mercurial models, where there really isn't much in the way of extra grip, which isn't necessarily a big deal, but again, something important to note. Something else that's also interesting to note about the Superfly this time around is that there's an Academy tier option and there's an Elite tier model. As of right now, at least for the first several colorways, Nike have not released a Superfly 10 Pro. If that's going to change in the future, I'm not entirely sure, but as of right now, it's either $95 or $285, with really nothing in between. Of course, there is the option of the Vapor 16 Pro at $160, which is a really good product for the money as well. However, unlike these two Superflies, those are low cuts rather than mid cuts. Speaking of which, the mid cut collar on the Superfly 10 Academy is as nice as we've ever seen at the sub $100 price point. It's made from what they're describing as a soft mesh material, and as you can see, it's got a pretty tight weave. It is in fact very soft, it's very stretchy. It maybe doesn't have quite as much tension as what you would find from the Flyknit on the high-end model. However, compared to what they've been featuring on mid-cut Academy tier Superflies, this is night and day as far as improvement is concerned. It feels great, it wraps your ankle closely, and also looks significantly better. It still doesn't offer really anything in the way of benefit. There's certainly no ankle support to be had from this very thin, stretchy material, but certainly if you do play on artificial grass where you have those rubber pellets present, having this collar wrapping your ankle more closely can prevent those from getting inside of the boots, which I know is a reason why a lot of people really do like the mid-cut design, and I think this will keep those pellets out way more effectively than past Superfly Academy collars would have. That stretchy mesh material also flows across the top of the foot, giving you that one-piece enclosure, making this a little bit different when compared to the Academy tier Vapor 16. And then of course you have that nice deep central lacing system, allowing for great adjustability, where when you tie the laces tight, the boot wraps your foot very closely and generally just fits quite well. It's not all perfect though, because as you can see, below the collar is more of a traditional football boot construction. It's not like the high-end models where it's kind of one material flowing up from the heel. So what you get because of this is an internal plastic heel counter that is nice and solid, and then internally it pretty much features the same mesh liner as what you would find on the Vapor 16 Academy at $85. However, unlike those football boots, you can see the construction ends up being much more traditional with the low cut design of the Vapor 16 Academy, which means that it's a little bit more contoured all the way around the back of your heel and the sides of your ankle, where because of this kind of, I don't want to say forced mid-cut design, but obviously a multi-material construction, you end up with much more of a straight up and down shaping to the back of the heel, which in turn results in what I would argue is less lockdown than what the low-cut Vapor has on offer. And don't get me wrong, it's not to the point where it's detrimental to the lockdown comfort and performance of the football boots. Certainly if you wear them with grip socks, it pretty much becomes a non-issue. But if we are comparing it to the Vapor that is the same football boot for $10 less, I don't think the lockdown through the heel is quite as good. And then the insole, fully removable, I'll give you guys a quick look at that. It features a mesh liner on top. It's made from a single layer of this gray foam, and then you can also see this little cutout under the heel. That's there for what is the zoom unit on this boot. Of course, you have the giant air branding, where unlike the top end model, where you get that giant 3/4 length zoom unit running through the forefoot, on both the Academy and the Pro tier options, it's simply a tiny little zoom unit underneath your heel that realistically, unless you're standing on a hard surface and kind of squish your heel into the boots, it's not something that's particularly noticeable, and the vast majority of people buying these won't even know it's there. Moving to the base, you'll find what is technically something that has been completely redesigned coming from the Superfly 9 Academy, but at the end of the day, does feel quite similar. I would say, if anything, this is just a little bit more naturally flexible through the forefoot than what the previous generation had on offer. And of course, you're getting those kind of bladed chevron studs rather than three-sided ones right here on the lateral side of the forefoot. But how much of an impact that actually makes on the performance is minimal, to say the least, where of course on the Academy tier Mercurials, you don't have a true FG option like you'd have on the Pros or the Elites. Instead, you get what they call FGMG, which stands for Firm Ground / Multi-Ground. I'm not sure why they don't just call it multi-ground if that's what they mean, because the implication and obviously justification for the changeup of having these conical studs here on the inside of the forefoot, as well as 2 conical studs at the heel, is that you can wear these on both natural as well as artificial playing surfaces. Is this really a true AG stud pattern? Absolutely not. And I would say in general, having all these blades still underneath your feet wouldn't be ideal in terms of, I suppose, injury prevention, if that is potentially a concern for you. But overall, when compared to the regular FG variation, because of these conical studs on the inside, the traction is a little bit less aggressive and you do have slightly more freedom to twist and pivot. Nonetheless, though, for the vast majority, there's still plenty of bite to be had here, and it definitely does, on firm natural grass, still feel very much like a speed boot layout. And then there's the weight, where I thought it'd be interesting to compare the Academy tier Superfly 9 to the model that's replacing it in the new Superfly 10, both in the same size, 9.5 US. We'll start off with last year's Superfly 9, and you can see that they weigh in at 8.55 ounces, the equivalent of 242 grams. Remember those numbers, and we'll throw on the Superfly 10, and you can see that they weigh in at 8.1 ounces, the equivalent of 229 grams, which is just over 10 grams lighter than last year's variation, something that I think is always nice to see, particularly when you're talking about a speed boot. And even when compared to the low-cut Vapor 16 Academy, it's within a gram or two despite having the mid-cut collar, which is also cool. Obviously, for under $100, you can only expect so much, and these are really nowhere near as light as what you're gonna find from the top-end Elite speed boots out there. But for that $95 price tag, I think the boots as a whole feel fairly light on feet. On feet, the Superfly 10 Academy feels fantastic. Again, I can't stress enough how much of an improvement this is over last year's Superfly 9. For the same amount of money, the upper is softer, the shaping of the boot is much more like what you're gonna find from the higher end models, which I would say in the last couple years of Academy tier Mercurials, they've kind of gotten away from them actually having a Mercurial-esque shape. This wraps your foot very, very closely and truly gives you that higher end speed boot fit and feel, which is awesome to see. The sole plate feels really nice underfoot. The upper itself is pliable and very sock-like, kind of giving you a little bit more of that Flyknit type sensation, while still not lacking in structure as well as overall responsiveness. The only complaint that I could make here is that because of the mid-cut collar, the shaping of the heel is a little bit more open. So again, without grip socks, you might run into some minor issues with heel slippage. Certainly compared to the Vapor 16, the heel lockdown isn't quite as good, but overall, they still fit phenomenally well for a pair of mid-cut takedown models under that $100 price point. From a width perspective, they are snug overall, but of course will fit most people. If you don't like a tight fitting football boot, I don't think the Mercurial series in general is a great option for you, but if you've worn Mercs in the past, it's unlikely that you're gonna have any issues with these. As long as you don't have excessively wide feet, they should work for most people. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So if you are looking to get a pair for yourself, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, I think it's safe to say that the Superfly 10 Academy is a definite win. It's a huge improvement over last year's model in just about every single way. For a sub $100 mid-cut football boot, it is by far aesthetically the most pleasing, and in terms of fit and feel, there really isn't anything about it that feels overly cheap. The one thing I will say is when you do compare it to that low cut and less expensive Vapor 16 Academy, those do fit a little bit better through the heel in my opinion. So if that really is priority for you, I think spending less on the Vapor would probably be the better call. But if you absolutely must have a mid-cut pair of football boots and your budget does not allow you to spend a ton of money on an elite tier option at $95 or less with an SR4U coupon code, I really think the Superfly 10 Academy is a solid choice. And that's something I've never been able to say before.